If there is a collusion between faith and law, who should prevail? Imagine you're a priest and a man kneels behind the screen crying and confessing to an ongoing crime like child exploitation. As a human, your instincts tell you to call the police, and as a priest, the church tells you if you speak, you're excommunicated.
So, what should happen now? Should the priest obey the state law and report the crime?
And as a citizen of the Philippines, RA 7610 tells you that if you don't speak up, you'll be criminally liable.
Or he should abide with the canon law and protect the sacrament at all costs. And if he stays silent, is the moral or dangerous? Let's find out in our podcast.
Let's start off with the church and its significance. Why is the seal of confession absolute? Or what is the church perspective?
In the lens of the church, confession is sacred. A priest isn't solely a listener, he's more than a listener, since during the sacrament of reconciliation, the priest hears sins confessed by the penitent for forgiveness and repentance. He is the so called persona Christi, or person of the Christ. This is based on Canon 983, Section 1, not the Supra, but the Catholic Church Code of Canon Law. It states that the sacrament is inviolable, absolutely forbidden, and that means that a priest can never tell what was confessed to him. Not to everyone, not to the courts, police, and not even for the protection of himself.
Then isn't it the same as the professional ethics of the doctor or lawyer?
No. What's important here is that the church doesn't treat this as an ordinary confidentiality, not like doctor patient or attorney client privilege. It's way deeper. Theology stated that priests hear confessions not as a human but as God. The secret does not even belong to the priest, but it belongs to the sacrament. Even if the pertinent person says, Father, you have my consent to tell the police. It's never like that. Most canonists argue that priests still cannot speak up since the information is sealed by God.
And if the priest breaks the seal?
Automatic excommunication, one of the gravest penalties in the Catholic Church.
Okay, wait. Let me ask everyone here. If you were the priest in that situation, would you stay silent?
Honestly, emotionally, it's difficult because someone might still be suffering.
Same, especially if the child is involved.
But from the theological side, breaking the seal destroys the trust in the sacrament itself. If people fear exposure, they may stop confessing entirely.
That being said, this isn't a theoretical debate, right? People have died from this.
Exactly. Let me spill the tea. If we may look into St. John Nepomucene in 1393, he was drowned in the river and died just because he would not tell the king what the queen said in confession. Or Saint Mateo Correa Magallanes in 1927, who was executed because he chose not to reveal the confession of the prisoners.
Wow. But the modern world is actually changing, and it's far different from before. I mean, look at Australia. Several states there now have laws imposing that the priest shall report any abuse heard in confession or face jail. In the United States, for example, there's a massive legal battle right now where the church is suing the state, claiming that these laws violates the First Amendment.
So basically, the government says report the abuse or face criminal penalties. However, this places the priest in a difficult position as he is torn between two obligations.
But bishops responded by saying that priests would rather go to jail than break the seal, which creates a complete legal and moral conflict.
So, how about we discuss this in the context of the Philippines? I believe this is where Philippine law becomes interesting. And since I am very keen to know the difference, let us further examine in the context of Philippines. So, under Rule 130, Section 24D of the Rules of Evidence, priests generally cannot be forced to testify regarding confessions made to them in their professional capacity. And this is recognized as a privileged communication intended to protect the sanctity of confidentiality of religious confession. Moreover, the courts generally avoid compelling priests to testify about sacramental confessions because of constitutional protection on religious freedom.
This is what we call priest penitent privilege. But there's a difference between canon law and civil law. Here, since civil law treats the privilege as belonging to the penitent, so compared to other countries, we haven't really reached a direct courtroom battle yet. Moreover, Philippine history also give us a related example during the discovery of the Katipunan in 1896. So involving Father Mariano Hill. So Teodoro Patino revealed the existence of the Katipunan to his sister, who then encouraged him to tell to the priest.
Wait, so was that considered a broken confession seal?
Most historians actually argued that it was not a sacramental confession inside the confessional. So it was more of a confidential conversation outside the sacramental itself. So that distinction is very important. So because under canon law, sacramental confession received the highest level of protection.
So this issue has actually reached the courts abroad already.
Yes. One of the earliest and most famous cases is People versus Phillips in 1813 in the United States. So, a New York court refused to force the Jesuit priest to testify regarding stolen goods he learned about during confession. The court even stated that compelling a priest to reveal confessions would practically destroy the practice of penance itself and interfere with religious freedom.
And even in modern times, a similar legal battle exists. In the case of Luciana versus Father Bahi, a victim of abuse claimed that she informed a priest about the abuse during the confession years earlier. Initially, the Luciana Supreme Court ruled that the priest may be compelled to testify as a mandatory reporter. However, a lower court ruled that because the communication was sacramental in nature, it remained protected under priest pertinent privilege.
But realistically speaking, do you think the Philippines could eventually adopt mandatory reporting laws involving clergy?
Well, I am not sure, but I think it is possible, especially as conversations about child protection become stronger globally.
But if that happens, the church will likely resist heavily, since for them, compromising the seal means compromising the sacrament itself.
So even if the penitence says, Father, you can tell the police, but the priest may still refuse. This is what I heard just now.
That's such a difficult legal conflict because the state views it as a privilege, but on the other hand, the church views it as a divine obligation.
So what happens in the Philippines? For example, if a priest hears a confession about abuse, is he just stuck or stagnant?
Well, there is what we call the theological tool, meaning a priest can and shall inform the abuser that their repentance is not sincere until they take the steps to protect the victim or even turn themselves in. He can actually withhold absolution or forgiveness until they have shown true contrition.
Then what is the outcome of the priest speaking or staying silent?
In the perspective of canon law, there is such a notion of death penalty of the soul. This infers that a priest who directly violates the seal incurs an automatic excommunication, aka latea sentencia. This is not a basic penalty. It's a penalty so grave that it is reserved to the Apostolic See in Rome to lift. So the moment he picks up the phone to betray the penitent, his life as a priest will cease.
Exactly. However, in the state's law perspective, as we have discussed earlier, if he does not pick up the phone, he may be liable under the Philippine civil law and the other as the case may be. So there is still no direct Philippine law that explicitly compels priests to reveal sacramental confessions. So the growing emphasis on child protection law may eventually challenge the traditional boundary between religious confidentiality and state interests.
So, in such a way, this issue already becoming alarming and may eventually require greater attention here in the Philippines. While there is no direct law specifically addressing the seal of confession involving abuse, the growing global focus on child protection and mandatory laws may push the country to confront this conflict directly in the future. But I do think that it becomes a balancing interest. For instance, does the state have a compelling interest? Yes, especially in protecting the children under the doctrine of parents patriae, where the state acts as a guardian of those who cannot fully protect themselves, particularly the minors and vulnerable individuals. But then the question becomes, is there a less restrictive means of protecting the victims without compelling a priest to violate his conscience and the seal of confession? That is a difficult question that the lawmakers, the courts, and the theologians continue to debate.
At its core, this debate isn't just about religion or law. So it's about two values society deeply cares about. So faith, conscience, justice, and public protection.
Well, this has been a very in-depth and meaningful discussion. As future lawyers and citizens living in a society shaped by both law and faith, we hope this conversation reminds us that issues like these are never simply black and white. The conflict between absolute seal of confession and mandatory reporting laws reflects a deeper struggle between protecting human dignity, preserving religious freedom, and ensuring justice for the vulnerable. Whether one agrees with more of the position of the state or the church, what remains important is our willingness to engage in a respectful, informed, and critical dialogue. So thank you for listening, and we hope this podcast encourages you to reflect not only as students of law, but also as members of society.